of AMR. But let me welcome all participants for this session for panel discussion on what, as the title goes, strengthening the antibiotics and diagnostics pipeline, as one would call it, largely for AMR, and how we want to build it further, and and what are the and possibly build different components of it, the needs, the status, the strengths, the weaknesses, challenges, and possible policies that is required to make it happen. So as a chair, let me begin to set up the context very, very briefly, and then I'm actually privileged to be joined by a phenomenal set of panelists, as indicated by my colleague Nandita, who bring different perspective on the table. From the beginning of somebody, people from corporate MNCs like Pfizer and GSK, to look at what and how they see the world in terms of the antibiotics and diagnostics for infectious diseases. And then we have Bugworks perspective, or a startup perspective, from Anand, to see what he's seeing across, not only in the antibiotics, but also in diagnostics. And then, of course, Colonel Dr. Karyappa, a larger component of public health. Where does this all fit in at the end of the day? Because if you're talking about this, all friends, we're talking about it for a reason. The reason is simple. We want to build solutions for societal problems in infectious diseases, right? And where are those challenges? So what we are hoping is the next 45 minutes or so, we will possibly delve into some of the aspects of it. And the way we want to do it is possibly understand broad component of different aspects of where, and according to each one of panelists, what is the current status? Does it require some level of push, or is it good enough in terms of the pipeline? First of all, if I may, before I go there, just to make everybody on the same page from a participation perspective, what we want to see is, when we say pipeline in form of a drug discovery or a diagnostics development perspective, is building strong, large number of candidates or the technologies which can go through the development stages. One can call it TRL, one can call it the development stages, and bring it all the way and nurture them so that they can then become a deployable product, be it a drug as an antibiotic, or be it a device for diagnostics. And this pipeline has to be supported, nurtured, because the lesser and the less quality that you may have here, it's going to impact the outcome of it, that is deployable product. To be able to have high number of high quality products supporting us as a deployable product, it's important that we begin from the beginning. We start from right there, support such technologies, support them at the early stage, support them at the scale-up stage, support them at the validation stage, clinical studies, clinical trial phase, and all that. And of course, the intermingling of the policies, intermingling of the collaborations, intermingling of the government, intermingling of non-government, intermingling of the market concepts is something that we want to discuss as we go forward, and what, according to each panelist who come from different background, who have been working in the different aspects of larger infectious diseases, what do they think of that? And possibly then somewhere kind of build small understandings. I will not even call them narratives, but understandings of what different panelists are feeling. And then we'll possibly take deeper dives into the next level as we go forward. So this is what we want to do. And I think we have very good, participants list, and some of them are good friends as well, who are very good to be, support us in the discussion today. Because of the limited numbers, we didn't have all, but they also can participate as we discuss forward. at the second half of the discussion, when we'll have the questions from the participants or the audience as well. So before that, let me begin quickly to say that as today's workshop, as we go forward, what we want to do is that to different components part of it. The morning session that I had an opportunity to be part of discuss the early stage discovery components, how the discoveries are being taken forward from the early findings, new concepts being driven and all that. And right now this session will focus on the pipeline. So let me begin by inviting my panelists now. I will request my good friend Dr. Sai to come in and possibly give his perspective. Dr. Sai, as you heard, has been leading R&D at Pfizer, and wanted to, while and we are going to keep it, as one call it, gender neutral. We'll keep it broadly neutral for antibiotics and diagnostics, and you please feel free to weave in so that we are not necessarily dividing it all the time. But Dr. Sai, your perspective on the pipeline, what do you think is required? Is it good? Is it bad? Something that you want to give it as an introductory remark. Thank you.
Sure. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Tasleem, Nandita, and others for inviting me to this panel. I'm honored to be among such exemplary folks. To address, I was thinking about how I would go about addressing your question, Tasleem. So first of all, the broader context for Pfizer is anti-infectives. And if we look at anti-infectives, around, that broadly includes antibacterial, antifungal, and other medications. Pfizer has one of the deepest pipelines, actual product portfolio, 80 plus products in the anti-infectives. And this segment is a focus area for Pfizer globally. Now, when I look at, then I want to answer this question from an antimicrobial resistance perspective, right? How does it contribute to AMR? And how does Pfizer look at this? So let me start by saying, first and foremost, is despite having this broad portfolio, Pfizer's focus on AMR starts with stewardship, starts with better ability to reduce the infections that might occur at the hospital, and also to look at how we could ensure that the prescriptions or that the medication that is being given to patients is the most appropriate. So it starts with that. Now, in India, Pfizer has a lot of programs with respect to AMR, and we continue to be very active with the government, with academia, and with hospitals and physicians. Now, if I look at the anti-infective development pipeline for Pfizer, we have about 24 products that are currently under development. And but that is not necessarily, I would say, that it addresses AMR, which is a question for us today. So what we find as we look at patient-centric and customer-centric innovation, diagnostics do form a very strong component that we believe will address AMR in specific. So why do I say that? So I think in a previous discussion, Tasleem, which this audience may not be privy to, we did talk about how when a patient comes into the hospital or into the doctor's office with a particular infection, the physician's primary motivation is to treat the patient. And they're going to do that. And we find this in conversations with physicians, with hospitals globally. They're going to do that with the best knowledge that they have available, and that includes what is prevalent in their vicinity. And our role as Pfizer, what we have tried to do is to partner with different areas for surveillance, so we could provide this information to physicians as to what's going on in their immediate vicinity, ideally in the local geography, but at least at a state or national level. Can Pfizer provide this information? So why do we do this? So that the physicians have a better chance of identifying what organism might be causing this illness and treating with whatever is available. Is that enough? That's not enough, because it is still, you can say, somewhat guesswork because it doesn't involve confirming through diagnosis that this is the right infection and therefore this is the right medication. And what we look at when that comes, even as we develop new anti-infectives in the pipeline, we're now looking at how can we partner better with diagnostics companies. Pfizer diagnostics is not a core area for Pfizer, so that we're very clear on that. We ourselves are not developing, but we are looking at how we can partner with diagnostics firms in order to have a better chance that any product that in Pfizer's portfolio is applied in the right way and minimize either the incorrect use or overuse in a physician setting. Lastly, but not the least, vaccines also are a key part of addressing antimicrobial resistance issues. And the way we believe vaccines contribute is more from preventive way, not just for AMR. Of course, vaccines have their own reason for existence to prevent serious disease or serious infections, but it also contributes in reducing incidences of AMR because then we know that first of all, we try to, like COVID is a perfect example. How can we prevent patients from reaching a stage that they actually need to be treated with antibiotics or anti-infectives? If we can prevent that, outside of COVID, things like pneumococcal disease, Hib infections, flu vaccines, these contribute in a long way to reducing the need for use of anti-infectives or antimicrobials. So I've covered several areas from a Pfizer's perspective. I hope that addresses your question, Tasneem. Maybe I can add later on after the other panelists have had a chance to speak.
No, thank you. Thank you. It does in a broader, and what I would request to add is that in the next set, when I'll come to you again, would be how do you see that current lot that we have in terms of the movement nationally or internationally, how strong the cohorts are. Are they good at the early stage? Do they fumble at the late stage? Or where do the the processes support and where do the processes fail us in terms of taking those forwards? Let me come to you on that as a next question. I'll come to you on that. Thank you. Yeah, perfect. Let me go to now Dr. Ashwini Pawar from GSK, and again respect in a way where a lot of excellent efforts are being built by big multinational companies towards building. Gosh. So the effort is being built to work in the infectious disease areas, which are not easy to work in, and very detailed work, and the portfolios are being created at many places, including at GSK. So a perspective from you, Dr. Pawar, in terms of how do you see the pipeline or the cohort or the lot or the efforts as together? How can we strengthen them further? What are the nationally? What do you see internationally? And what are the models which have emerged? What are the engagements of different government sectors, non-government sectors would have emerged? Some opinion, some thoughts from you on that.
Thanks, Tasleem. Firstly, I think I'd like to thank Nandita and you for inviting me, and very privileged to be a part of this panel, and also talking to the audience who is focusing on this important topic. I think, firstly, I'd like to just echo the thoughts that are shared by Dr. Sethuraman in terms of how important it is for us to focus on various different areas of innovation for AMR, because we as a country, I think the amount of burden of AMR that we face, and let's talk about the ground level. I have day before yesterday, I was in Kokila Bain in Bombay, and I was talking to primary care physicians. And when I'm talking about the approaches that they have clinically, frankly, I can clearly see there is a big ask in terms of how can we innovate in terms of letting them know about the resistance, at the OPD level? How can they be quick in it? Because a data that is generated and comes back to you after 2 years, and then you take a decision, that's not really something that works. If I'm sitting in an OPD, can I really have that rapid diagnostic test to understand how do I choose? Because that one simple step, I can save antibiotics. I can be judicious in terms of using it better, because in my country, when I'm talking about India, it is important to be wise. We don't really have a very strong pipeline that's there immediately. And we are looking at building robust pipelines, because we do understand that what is it that we need to really focus on. But at this point in time, there are clear practical I think opportunities that are open for all of us to debate and discuss. But the first important thing is that are we aware what is the situation? So the surveillance data that is created right now, whether it's by the by different pharmaceutical companies or whether it's by India, the AMRSN, that is very, very important to really identify what are the areas that we really need to work on. But also important is we speak about the pull mechanisms, right? At the ground level, are we aware about what are those needs and opportunities that are really the ask that's there of a clinician? So how can, as a group, we can really connect with the issues which are there at the ground level, which there could be low hanging fruits that can impact actually the choices of the clinician, that can impact what a patient is really following immediately. Are there areas that we can focus on? Because we are a group that is that the ecosystem that we have is, we do have government with us, we have corporates, we have the innovators, we have the facilities for research, whether it's in India or globally in terms of incubation facilities. But can we strategize on areas which are immediate low-hanging fruits in terms of short term, and then we can really move forward saying, yes, this is something that I need to focus on immediately, because that's my important concern clinically at this point in time. Because we clearly know clinically there are some infections where we are out of options, and there are some infections where the organism is a little resistant in terms of the AMR that's there. So how can we identify these opportunities, strategize in terms of where we want to focus on, is something that I feel is the most important. But the other bit, I'm really happy to be a part of, like, talking to all of you. But I feel the other very immediate opportunity that we have is how can we utilize whether it's the expertise or the facility that we have currently within India. Say, for example, we have some immediate things that we can focus on in terms of having a crosstalk between all of us, who can eventually facilitate coming something into reality. And that is an area that surely is a very open opportunity for us. Globally, we are aware that there are clear paths in terms of regulatory pathways, where there is the expedited pathway that's there for research to really come into practice, especially in the antibiotics arena. In India, can we really look at models which can fasten the seeing of the success of the innovations that we are really looking at? And those models really need to be discussed with the government. How can we really look at those pathways which can really fasten the process? Or can we really look at models where the proof of concept to the actual extended eventual proof that we create in terms of standardized studies or validation to actually that particular thing seeing the market? Can we develop those models where it can really be something that can be fastened? Because we will have limited resources and we will need to work on something that is more real sooner. So these are, I think, few things I feel are very, very important. For GSK, GSK is currently obviously at ground level. We do connect with even tier 2 and tier 3 practitioners. And trust me, there is surveillance data that's there in the country, but there is also a gap in terms of changing the behavior of the healthcare practitioner or even the informal health prescribers which are there. So not just about the surveillance, not just about new antibiotics, not just about the diagnostic kits, but there is a big scope in terms of how do we really impact the behavioral piece that's there in this, though that may not really be the primary area that we are looking at in terms of innovation here, but that is one area that actually gets the impact, right? Because that is one area that really is also open in terms of impacting, because we do have some data. How do you really impact the behavior also becomes very, very important. That are just some initial thoughts, Tasleem, from my side, and we'll look forward to, I think, having some specific discussions.
Thank you, Ashwini. May I, with this, some interesting thoughts on the reach out and looking at the broader outreach involving very important components of, as one would call it, the impact. May I go to my good friend Anand, who has been leading a phenomenal effort, not only at BugWorks, but his other engagements in terms of taking the journey of development of antibiotics at a different level altogether. So Anand, if I may request very quickly for your thoughts on the larger aspect of strengthening, and of course you have seen a biotech perspective very, very closely now. So I wouldn't call it a startup, but more of a biotech perspective, and a smaller size enterprise which is developing innovative products as antibiotics. Your perspective on how the current setup works and what you would see that could be added further.
Right. Thank you so much, Tasleem, Nandita, for this opportunity, and really have to admire and appreciate what CCamp is trying to do for this important multidisciplinary problem. And it's a privilege to sit on the same podium with these distinguished panelists. So for the audience to first understand what is the ground reality, let's start from there. The Lancet study that came out in January, Tasleem, showed 2019 data, about 1.5 million deaths. And probably approximately 30% of the global mortality is coming from India. Let's be very honest and humble about the problem we have here, right? So we have a huge issue. 413,000 children less than the age 5 pass away due to bacterial illnesses. And about 417 out of 100,000 are impacted by AMR. So we have some huge problems. The latest data that came from ICMR and GARD-P shows more than 80% drug resistance rates to Acinetobacter, Klebsiella, E. coli, closely tracked with Pseudomonas. We are losing frontline antibiotics, and colistin is becoming a regular use in many hospitals. This is the backdrop. And Tasleem, I want your audience to know that diagnostics and drug discovery are two sides of the same coin. They go hand in hand. Both are very important. I will speak about therapeutics simply because I work in that area, but both are equally important. We need diagnostics so that when the patient is there in a very difficult situation, instead of waiting 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours to find out which bug has affected the patient, potentially in 2 hours or even 45 minutes, some people are working to see if we can get a spot identification of whether it's a virus versus bacteria. And then if it's bacteria, what type of bacteria, will go a long distance in promoting the right antibiotic for the right bug. So I love diagnostics, and I think it's very important, and particularly in countries that have high burden like India. In drug discovery, Tasleem, there are only 43 clinical trials in the world, according to Pew Trust 2021. And it's amazing that most of the big pharmaceutical companies have left the space because I think it's a difficult space. The economics is highly questionable because the business market is broken. For the audience here, why is antibiotics such a difficult space? One, the bugs will always beat us. Whichever antibiotic you come with has got a small limited shelf life because bacteria will find ways to break it. Two, you take an antibiotic for 5 days or 6 days. It's not a lifelong therapeutic like statin or cardiovascular or diabetes. There's no return on investment. There is no volume. And when you come out with a new antibiotic, you don't want people to use the antibiotic. It's kept as a reserve drug for the difficult patient who's dying of bloodstream infection, right? Huge value to society. It's the very edifice of medical practice, yet there is no volume. So it doesn't make sense. There are only a handful of companies in the world that are working on antibiotics, big pharma. Thankfully, GSK and Pfizer are in that coveted list. And so it's great to see a participation from there. But 90%, Tasneem, of innovation is coming from SMEs, including us. And we struggle through it. It's very, very difficult because there's not enough funding for science. And even if you get an FDA approval, it's hard because there is no money at the end of it. But let's talk about the positive things that are going on. Today in India, we have an ecosystem. We sit inside CCAMP. We work with the Bangalore cluster. And I'll be very honest and humble with it. We are doing as good a science as any of our compatriots in Boston or Basel or Bay Area are doing, because today's ecosystem is good in India. Except for the funding piece, the rest of the pieces are coming together well here in India. We have access to MDR isolates that are impossible to think of in Boston and other areas very early in our drug discovery journey. We have access to clinicians and to incubators like you have. Funding is an issue, and we can talk about it follow on. But I'm still quite hopeful that you will see a few companies coming out of India solving problems for India, because the big companies are not necessarily worried about LMICs. So we really need solutions from LMICs for LMICs. So there's contextual innovation, there's affordability, and there's accessibility. There's no point innovating only for the Western market when the disease burden is here. But I'm positive, and I'm hoping that with the type of push mechanisms from CARB-X, from BIRAC, the pull incentives that governments like United States are looking at so that they can pay for antibiotics as via subscription instead of volume, we see many potential changes coming in the horizon. So I'll leave it with a positive outlook.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anand, as energetic as ever. Hello, can you hear me? Yeah,
yes.
Sorry, I think there was some unmute issue. But as energetic as ever, Anand, I think many crucial components you have brought in one shot while you talked about diagnostic. At the same time, you you did speak about the issues related to antibiotics development at large and what is working very well and what could work better. I think you and the funding component falls right in the latter immediately, and something that hopefully the models will emerge, and that's something we are hoping, that the models will emerge where a kind of a converging efforts to sustain such drug development efforts. And if I may say, even futuristically, to build diagnostics efforts which can support the specific antibiotics development in settings and work as a companion diagnostic and so on, making a larger piece of one setup will be very important, like AST is working in conjunction with specific or a broad spectrum and so on. With that, I'm coming to Colonel Dr. Cariappa, who has been really a good friend and also a well-wisher of some of the efforts at CCAM, who actually has spent, as you saw, significant time in infectious disease per se, more so in HIV and so on. But at the same time is largely interested in taking innovations and helping them go large scale, something that Anand spoke about, which is a challenge in terms of the enterprises developing the antibiotics and so on. From a perspective of NGO, a perspective of philanthropic, or he is with Tata Trust, as we know, and somebody who has been supporting efforts of Tata Trust for public health and scaling up and making impact at large, working with the the developers, the practitioners, and many other components. So requesting your inputs, Dr. Cariappa, in terms of what do you think somebody who is working in the field, who is attempting to work in the field, but to see the development side on the other side, where are you seeing, where as a pipeline, where are the strengths, where are possibly weaknesses, and what is required to make the impact much more meaningful? Over to you, Dr. Cariappa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tasleem, for inviting me and having me, giving me the opportunity to share a few words with you all. And it's been a pleasure to listen to Drs. Anand, Dr. Ashwini, and Dr. Sai to hear their views. I'm just going to take one sentence straight from Dr. Anand, what he said about contextual innovation. That's absolutely true. Let me just kind of put it that I'm representing the underdog here. The underdog is the masses in India. People of India who are the ones affected, and not just the ones in cities or the ones who are attending, your fancy hospitals and your corporate setups. Let's talk about the common man. So let me just kind of pretend that I'm the common man. So obviously I've got no checkbook with me. So the philanthropy is behind me, but not with me. So let me bring it out here. The pipeline which you're talking about, Dr. Tasleem, this pipeline in the public health context, we've got two kinds of pipelines. One which brings you drinking water, which we all like, and the other is the sewage, which takes it away. So when you're developing products, you must, people who are innovating, I admire people who really innovate because of the way I'm fascinated by their ideas. It's actually ideas that make the world go round. This pipeline of yours, if it is at the end of it going to give a product which no one can use, however brilliant it may be, is of no use to anyone. So I'm not talking of commercial success or the profits that you can make. I'm talking of end use for people, because health of the people. And COVID has brought out this one thing definitely. I hope the world leaders and the intellectual thought leaders have understood one thing, that we cannot contain disease in any one place. If we are falling sick in a particular country or a zone, it is going to spread somewhere else also if it has the potential. So if antibiotics are going to work here or not going to work here, that same resistant strain will spread everywhere. So we can't insulate and isolate ourselves that, okay, we are in continental US, nothing's going to affect us. It will affect everyone. So that is the point I'm trying to bring about. The end user are the people. And that's where the major gaps arise. I heard Dr. Ashwini talking about the interface with the clinicians and the prescribers. But there are so many other prescribers. The chemist himself is a prescriber. You've got Jhola doctors all across rural India who prescribe. There are even urban doctors who prescribe, overprescribe, because the people demand these things. So education or information is not just a unilateral effort targeted at clinicians. It is a bidirectional thing. You have to look at addressing gaps in the knowledge that is there for people to, the demand for treatment or antibiotics or any such things has to go down. It's for example, when I was a young doctor many years back, I used to prescribe medicines very rarely. I was more of those kind of things, take 2 spoons of ginger juice with honey, and then you add some peppercorns in it and have that kind of stuff. My patients used to be very unhappy. They said, Doctor Saab, to dawai likhte nahi. So I used to tell them that you don't need medicines unless you actually need medicines. That transition is something that we have to take seriously. And I see big pharma, especially if they are serious about it, like big tobacco. Unless you are serious about doing something, it is just going to be targeting at clinicians who, poor chaps, they're already overburdened with information, and you tell them don't prescribe antibiotics till you can see an antibiogram. Well, that is the reality, is that the patient is the one who's insisting on treatment to be given to him at all levels. So does a doctor, adhere to what the patient says or what his conscience tells him? So that's a fine line, and antibiotic resistance is spreading a lot because of that. The next part what I'd like to bring about here is, innovators, somehow they have this idea that people will think that if they make profits, it's bad. It's a bad word. I don't think so. Unless an idea is viable, it will not reach the mainstream. Unless you have an idea that will actually work on ground, it will not reach the mainstream. So I feel personally that every innovation must succeed before it can be rolled out. And governments everywhere are reluctant to try out anything new. That is why new technologies always hesitantly make their way into a government system, because governments look at sustainability. They look at how long it will last. They look at replacements. So when philanthropies or NGOs collaborate with governments, these are the exact things that are being looked for. So rather than dive into doing something new, it's better to go with the old and steady rather than have a new young upstart on the block. So that's not I'm not cautioning anyone. I'm just saying that's the reality. So new innovations are always welcome, but they should not be gimmicks or flashes in the pan, because in the broader public health system, it is ultimately a matter of credibility. I would just say, for example, if Dr. Anand's any innovation of his name is going to be attached to that innovation for the rest of 2-3 decades, he will be even more circumspect about what he does. Dr. Anand, I'm not talking about what you do. It's the spirit of what I'm talking about. You'll be more deliberate. So every innovator must understand that they have a sense of responsibility. It is not corporate social responsibility. It is individual social responsibility of an innovator. You owe it to the people. That's what you're targeting. And if you can make a profit at it, I'm going to wish you all the best for that, because I feel you have to have a profit margin built in, otherwise things don't work at all. The last thing that I'd like to add is that anything and everything in the public health system requires money and funding. And funding is, again, as you brought out very correctly, Dr. Tasleem, you have the ecosystem in place. And unless there is awareness that is created among our leadership, when I say leadership, is not just government leadership, but business leadership, big pharma leadership, that you need to do massive education campaigns. And it's not just education, it is behavior change communication campaigns focusing on health literacy. Health literacy doesn't just mean, understanding that you're ill or you're well or eating good diets. Health literacy means understanding the requirement of taking the correct medicine at the correct time from the correct source, and also not having a Zomato bag of medicines. You take, okay, last time I took this time let me pop the same thing. So that kind of regulation also needs to be worked along side by side. Hence, over the past year and a half, I think, we've been discussing it with CCAMP about their antimicrobial resistance coalition. And I think it's a wonderful idea. And I think its time has come, and it must be pursued. And, if I had a checkbook in my hand, I definitely would have given funding for this thing. But that is a line that must be pursued. It is the way forward, not just for antimicrobial resistance, but for various health ailments, because all of these are integrated into one human being, the human body that we have, of the Aam Admi, not of the rich guy, but the Aam Admi. With that, Dr. Tasleem, I'm going to stop here and then wait for how things develop in our panel discussion to chip in further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cariappa. I think you gave a very broad and comprehensive view. And just on a lighter note, I'm sure we will find the checkbook from you very soon. But it was to be on a lighter note. So, but coming back, I think it's very important aspects we heard. And as I'm seeing the comments, I think the perspectives on this panel, which are very, very different on the same aspects of health and the antimicrobial resistance and health, and the innovations for that are very, very enriching and something that we want to build on. We have 12 odd minutes before we, I think, go on and wrap this up. As far as I know, but I'm happy to be corrected by my colleagues. But what I wanted to quickly hear before we take any specific question, we have a question in the chat box, but before we do that, I want to request people to send their questions. I will pick questions from there and run it by the panel for their response. So please do write directly there. While they do that, a couple of minutes or inputs, a minute each input from panelists this time on if they were to pick 2 to 3 things. And this is largely for this particular session, topic. If they were to choose 2 things that they could benefit in building and strengthening the antibiotics and diagnostic pipeline for India and beyond, what those 2 things could be. It could be 1, but maximum 2 I'm going with. But if you say only 1 thing I want to say, I want to emphasize it so much, I'm perfectly fine. I'll go in the same order so that there is no confusion. If I may request Dr. Sai, if you can come in with your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Tasleem. I think other panelists have very eloquently and energetically answered some of the questions that you posed earlier. So I really like what Dr. Anand had said, contextual innovation. I really like that. That's a take home for me today. So to answer your question, Tasleem, is what is that? If I say 1 thing, I think with a broad pipeline, and I'll keep Pfizer's context in mind as I answer this for India and AMR, I would say diagnostics. Diagnostics so that we can identify the disease quickly, as was mentioned, whether it is 45 minutes, 2 hours, anything better than what we have today, which is 48 hours or more, I think would be the best way to ensure that the right medication is given for the patient at the right time.
Fair enough. I think it's very, very important. And I think diagnostic is becoming crucial, and the antibiogram, is and rapid antibiogram, if I may say so, is actually going to change the way the treatments would happen, both inpatient and outpatient, if we can achieve it. So I completely agree on that. And thanks for that input.
And Pfizer is ready. I know, as we've been working with you guys at CCAMP to promote such innovations and encourage and develop them wherever they come from. So.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. If I may come to Dr. Ashwini. Ashwini, if you were to pick one or 2 points that you would think that, if I had a magic wand, I would do this to support that, what would be your thoughts?
So one of the things that's striking me while I'm just listening to the panelists is that we have the right ecosystem, right? And something that's very well highlighted by Dr. Anand is the problem is urgent, highlighted very well. So we have the ecosystem and we have some urgent issues to be handled. What is the gap in between is possible policies and models that we need to look at that can ensure that when we're looking at these innovations, how can I bring that to the table? How can I bring that to the patient population? And I do believe that there is a scope of making a huge difference there, but we'll have to innovate because AMR to India is a unique and big problem. That means all stakeholders together, if we can ensure from research to bench, that journey is smoothened, it is helped, it's stimulated, it's made easy by collaborating, I think that can change the picture because we have some beautiful ideas. I've missed the sessions earlier, but I truly believe there's some very good ideas that are there with us. How can we really work on the models that can really incentivize it for all the stakeholders who are working on this and bring it something on the table sooner? Because there are some urgent needs that are there right now. As the years pass by, it's going to be critical for India.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Ashwini. I think if I may pick the words from there, considering the urgency of the matter, we need to do it soon, and innovations need to actually come fast. And how do we incentivize the system at different levels so that systems deliver in time without having the trouble? So I think, make a proactive approach from their side. Thank you for that. Coming to Anand. Anand,
yeah,
your thoughts?
Sure. Taslim, just 2 points. But first of all, I'd like to thank the fellow panelists, and I hope CCAMP can bring us all together. I can learn a lot from more deep interactions with these folks, Taslim. So 2 points. One is, since AMR involves at least 7 to 8 different ministries, that is environment, agriculture, animal husbandry, poultry, human health, so many things, we need a strong national action plan that's at the Prime Minister's office level, PMO level, because any amount of discussion, Taslim, that we do will break because if we don't have a strong national action plan with the budget and the owner, probably driven by Niti Aayog out of the Prime Minister's office to coordinate. It is not a single dimensional problem. It's too many dimensions. 1. 2, and my last point is, Taslim, let us convert the issue in India into an advantage to promote clinical trials. There are more patients who are multi-drug resistant with Acinetobacter and Klebsiella in India than I can ever find in the United States or UK or Switzerland or anywhere else. What if we take lessons from COVID regulation and accelerate approvals of new antimicrobials and diagnostics using our patient population? So we're not misusing anyone. We're just simply saying that this is where the battle is. The battleground is so hard. Let me fight the tough battle, and that will give me the best bullets to tackle any other battle anywhere else. So I think India can take a leadership position through regulatory changes to make data sets coming from India, Taslim, so valuable to the rest of the world because we have MDR patients. So those are the 2 areas.
Engaging the best in a way. Absolutely. Is a very important thing. You look at your home ground, find out where you would be able to provide the support and build the engagement, so that when you develop together, you are one of the first beneficiaries of the outcomes as well.
Exactly.
I think that's very, very important and very well said. Thank you. And of course, I agree with the high level, interventions or the oversight that is needed, very much so. Thank you. Coming to Dr. Karyappa, Dr. Karyappa, you have also answered some of the queries in the chat box, but your thoughts about one or two components that you see, if done, if we can pull on that, it might help a larger picture in terms of building a nice cohort of innovations in right manner, affordable, something that can bring the impact on the ground.
I just wanted to say that whatever Dr. Anand said, I would like to say that maybe CCAMP is already on the track for that. They have managed to rope in a few influential people. I think maybe you've got the Office of the Scientific Advisor also involved with the AMA.
He's
So that's
chairing
a step. That is the way to go. And you, Dr. Anand, have identified it correctly. Every system has its own hierarchy, and it's always a hierarchical approach that works very well in driving something. But from this point of view, what I'm going to also suggest here, because of the innovation focus that CCAMP also has, that maybe, just maybe, because the innovators usually won't have their finger on the pulse of the requirements of society other than what is their circle of exposure. So maybe what you can also have is a kind of a data bank or a database of the requirements. You could have a kind of a repository where people send in their requirements. Okay, this is what I feel sitting in this place. Maybe in Ladakh I'm sitting, this is what I feel. Or in a tribal area I'm sitting and this is what I feel. So some active push and pull kind of collection of these requirements of people, which then can be, innovators can pick and choose from a basket. Okay, this is something that I can think of addressing, or I've got an idea like this. It's like a hackathon. These young kids nowadays in colleges, you give them ideas and they develop solutions for it. So the same way, maybe CCAMP can also think about, an out-of-the-box repository for these problem situations that are faced at the peripheral levels of the echelon. Like, you will always come to know what is happening in Bombay or in Delhi, but you will not come to hear about something that is in the tribal hinterland of Orissa or maybe in Chhattisgarh. So those are the things that you need to maybe think of having a repository. That said and done, I'm not going to add on more right now here. Let's continue with the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I think, again, very important aspects brought about by you, Dr. Karyappa. The effort that we are putting together, IAIH, you mentioned, India AMR Innovation Hub. We have had 2 meetings. We are working on the National Action Plan suggestions on that, and with all stakeholders, and something that should build up further. Hopefully, at least will give us a skeleton to build up further. I think we have come to a very a few minutes we have in hand, but not even few, a couple of minutes. So I want to still take a couple of questions which are there, if panelists are okay, and if organizers are also fine. Please give me a time check. If I'm overrunning, I'm happy to wrap up soon. Nandita, do I have a couple of...
I think, Tasleem, let's take a couple of questions, because it has really been a very engaging discussion.
Okay.
So we could take some questions.
Okay, excellent. So I'll take it in the order which have come, couple of questions which are there. There is a question, it says that, is there any diagnostic test to check antibiotic resistance point of care? And if yes, they can be a part of prescription before suggesting antibiotic. Something this would be related to more or less an AST or the pathogen, ID sorts. Anybody wants to expand on that? I can take a shot. Anand, you are saying it. Please go.
I'm just saying that, as you said, there are multiple tests that are coming now, antibiotic susceptibility tests. We are still not at that 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours, Tasleem, that we need to be. It's still culture-based methods. And what we are hearing, Tasleem, from the industry is that before the end of this year, we're hoping to see, before the end of 2022, we're hoping to see these boxes that could potentially be put in the ICU that could be able to give a turnaround in about 2 to 3 hours using new microfluidics sequencing techniques. That should be fantastic, at least to see a virus versus bacteria. And then within the bacteria, if we can talk about identifying the microbe as well as resistance patterns, we're all waiting for it. And including Nesta, there are many award-based platforms that are pushing, including CCAMP, Nesta, others are pushing. And at least 250 companies around the world are working to break this, to come up with affordable, quick turnaround spot diagnostics. We're getting there. Some light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely, absolutely. And some of, a same day understanding of pathogen ID and sensitivity or susceptibility rather is, as is very close by. I think many you will see in a couple of years, many come by as well. So that's very fascinating. The next question, which is a broad question, which possibly is in how do we make AMR attractive for big pharma so that they start investing in this? I didn't dictate this question, but I will direct this question to the big pharmas and put them in corner for now. But it's sometimes fun to do that. So let me begin with Sai.
Sorry, can you repeat that, Tasleem?
A question that has come. It says that how can we make AMR attractive for big pharma so that they start investing in this?
Well, I think that the pull methodology is the best methodology. I think it's in general for whether it is vaccines, and particularly as Dr. Anand also said, right? These are products that we develop with the hope that it doesn't get used. Even for products that we are currently marketing, one of the Pfizer's commitment is, even as we market it, is to advise them not to use it until it is absolutely necessary. So that's a tough business to be in. And there is no other way in order to encourage new development without knowing that there is a market for it. So pull methodology, in my mind, would be the best way to encourage work in this space.
Fantastic. No, thank you. Thank you. That helps. Any comments from you, Dr. Ashwini?
Yes. So right now, when we talk, like we have Dr. Sethuraman and myself from GSK and Pfizer, and trust me, like just as a medical affairs person and as an industry professional, I can tell that for both the organizations, AMR is, I wouldn't say attractive, because just putting it right in terms of the perspective, when a pharma has the ability to impact the healthcare in a bigger scale, it is important for a pharma. So it is important for organizations like us, but for others, to make it really attractive, I think what's important is that there is a big opportunity in terms of making an impact for the pharma. But because this is the space and the challenges which are identified by Dr. Anand Kumar, can we have models which incentivizes their coming to the market? And we could have different ways, but I think that journey, the regulatory pathway and that journey needs to be a little easier. And there has to be more incentivization that really happens, which is happening currently at the global level. For example, there's some innovation happening at global level where the quicker review or the pathways are made easier overall in terms of regulatory. And that is the major hurdle for any big pharma in terms of innovation per se. But I would say for us, definitely it is an important priority to work.
Fair. No, absolutely. Thank you. And we will hopefully have incentives, policies to ensure, and the models for have all of us come together, and strengthen this pipeline. I think, if I may just conclude that way, I think we need all partners to come together and play their role, not only the players, developers, government, NGOs, society, and build models so that we can together strengthen the pipeline, strengthen the efforts in antibiotics and diagnostics, and hopefully deliver what is very important is solutions for the society, for a healthy being, for not only the top economic strata, but also the lower economic strata, which are usually the most underprivileged for their healthcare services. So with that thought of coming together, let me thank all my panelists for fantastic session and inputs that you have provided. The audience, which have been glued to the thoughts and the inputs, I have not been able to take all the questions, so apologies that we couldn't do all questions, but fantastic to have you around. And of course, organizing team, which have actually pulled together this entire workshop and this session. Thank you all, and back to you, Nanita. Thank you.
Thank you, Tasleem and fellow panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I think absolutely fascinating panel discussion and a wonderful way to sort of, I won't say end the workshop, but actually begin a lot of the work that we have decided to do with the support of all stakeholders, all partners, and the startup ecosystem as well. Thank you once again, Dr. Anand, Colonel Dr. Kariappa, Dr. Sai, Dr. Ashwini, and Tasleem. Special thanks to my team at CCAMP, our team at CCAMP, Swati and Meghna. A lot of back-end work has taken place to bring this together. And we hope to bring many more such interesting, webinars and seminars to sort of, address the AMR issue. So with that, thanks once again, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
A clap for all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a wonderful panel. Actually.